Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a second episode of a special 2026 series of What's Up with Startups. And this is a three-part series on EU public funding for scale-ups. And with me, as in the first episode, today is Akul Raizada. Hello, Akul. Nice to have you back. And Akul is a policy and investment advisor, helping companies and guiding them through the maze of EU funding applications. Nice to have you here again, Akul. Hello.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Amin, for having me for the second round of discussion. So happy to be here and happy to discuss.
Excellent. So last time we were spoke in general about how European Union supports scale-ups and what funding vehicles are available, and in particular, we went deep into how Innovation Fund works and how what are mistakes that are usually made by companies, by scale-ups who apply for funding. So if you want a bit of background on that, go back to the first episode and have a listen. It's a bit of a long one, but I think it was really, I mean, for me, it was really insightful to understand how European funding works in general. But today, we're gonna go more specific, and we're gonna focus on the last round of Innovation Fund winners and losers. And we will not only look in general, but we will also go very specific into this subject, which is close to my heart and close to Akul's as well, because he and I both worked in this industry, and the industry is the European battery industry. So, without further ado, let's dive in. And I would kick off by asking you, Akul, to give an overview of the last Innovation Fund round, which closed and which, like, what what have you seen? What was European Union rewarding? Which kind of project? Which kind of scale? Which kind of technologies? I mean, what were they looking for at that time?
Okay. So maybe what I will do is I will start with like a quick overview of what we saw in terms of technology, industrial scale, emissions, and bankability.
Yeah.
But then I'll keep it high level. And when we get to the battery aspects, we can get really into the specific trends that we have spotted. So we can use the innovation battery call as sort
Mhm.
of the playground to really explain to the listeners what the Commission focused on and how it really translates to the European policy and ambitions. First and foremost, as we talked about in the last call as well, the Innovation Fund is fundamentally a deployment and scale instrument. So it's not an R&D grant per se. And we talked about in the last episode as well what are the sort of core measuring criterions that you have to go through in order to be selected for the Innovation Fund. And what we have seen overall across the different calls, so there were three calls. There was the Innovation Fund battery call, there was the Innovation Fund net zero technologies, which we talked about in much more details in the last call, last episode. And then there is the hydrogen auction, hydrogen bank auction. So these
Mhm.
were the three sort of sub calls within the larger innovation call um,
Yeah.
2024.
You
So
can
what?
ask, can you say that even like the names of the calls, which is like the I don't know how to say, a batch of particular funding that you could apply for, they already kind of signal what European Union is looking for. So it's batteries, it's hydrogen, and then everything, and then the net zero technologies, everything else, which is
Yeah.
not batteries or hydrogen.
So net zero technologies is everything else, and in some parts and forms also what is covered in let's say battery. call or what is covered as part of the larger hydrogen ambition. So if you're doing something on hydrogen, which is innovative in terms of manufacturing, but you're not doing production, you're still eligible for the net zero technology.
Uh-huh.
Okay. If you are, so what we saw in battery call, and we'll talk about it as we go through, we saw that it was more focused on gigawatt size production, and there was one project which was more focused on a uh, specific part of the process. But
Hmm.
apart from that, it was more on scaling of production capacity, more on manufacturability. Whereas if you are a battery uh, startup or a battery founder, you can still be part of the net zero technologies. You can look at clean manufacturing if you are innovating on one of the processes involved in cell or battery manufacturing. So we just need to keep that in mind. So if you are especially if you are a startup or a founder working in battery or cell or the associated processes, technologies, chemistries. In the IF24, you would be more suited for the NZT, the net zero technologies. And same is true for hydrogen as well. So if you were doing something within the hydrogen supply chain, which was not production,
But it's
you,
important to, like I
yeah,
said, it's important to really understand, not just look at the headlines, but to really understand, okay, say I'm a battery startup, say I'm a silicon anode battery startup, for example, and lots of those now, and I want to apply for the funding, and then I look at oh, it's a battery. So I apply for the battery, and then I fail because in reality, what they were looking for in that call is for big like scale up. But if I would apply for net zero, I still would get a chance to get some funding.
yep. Yep. So I think it's very important for funders and startups to go through what exactly these calls cover. Just reading
Mhm.
hydrogen or just reading battery doesn't mean that they are just, they're focused on everything that battery has to do with, or they're focused on everything that hydrogen has to do with. So you need to be very focused on exactly what you're doing. Are you bringing in a new manufacturing process? Are you bringing in a new chemistry? Does it tie back to the exact coverage of these specific funds? And you gave an excellent example. So if you're working on an innovative chemistry, you are probably more suited for NZT. Or if you're
Mhm.
working on decarbonizing one of the manufacturing processes, or you're coming up with an innovative manufacturing process along the cell or hydrogen storage manufacturing, for example, then you need to look at NZT, and it starts to become even more important for the Innovation Fund 2025. So unlike 2024, Innovation Fund 2024, which had a dedicated battery call, the Innovation Fund 25 doesn't have a dedicated battery call. So this year it's been replaced with heat processes, so industrial heat processes where they're,
Sorry to interrupt you, just for everybody to be clear, we're recording this in January 2026,
yeah.
and the Innovation Fund 2025 call is still in process, as I understand, right?
Yes, yes. So we had the info day at the start of December, and then now it's in process. So a lot of people, as we speak, are working on preparing their grant proposals, evaluating what they have, what they do not have, and so on and so forth. And then we will have the first submissions going in probably end of April, and then
So
results
actually,
coming. Yeah.
the IF 2025 will be actually decided this year in 2026.
Yes, yes. I think yeah.
That's the first confusion you hear.
Yes, it's a classic. Yeah, it's a classic one from the commission, but yeah, that's how it works. So 2025 starts in December 2025. You submit your applications by end of April, and then the sort of answers to your proposals or whoever has been selected comes towards the end of 2026, and then you will have final confirmations on the grant proposal signature will probably happen for some of the projects in 2027. So this is the cycle that the innovation fund
That's
follows.
over a year, more than a year.
Yes, it is an exercise which can take you anywhere between 12 months to 18 months.
Okay. And so, how is the 2025 different from 2024? Because, so
So,
sorry, I interrupted you because just before these listeners to clarify what years we're talking about and when,
yeah,
the time. scales. So yeah, please
Yeah.
back to the difference you started to explain.
Yeah, but I think it's important that you brought that point because it allows the listeners, especially startups and founders, to sort of envision what kind of time commitment we're talking about, not only in preparation for the grant proposal, but also the waiting that you have to do, after the submission. Then you're selected for the grant, and then there is the final signature of the grant. And
Mhm.
as we see in the case of battery call, the people, there were six projects which were selected, and only five actually signed up. So we'll talk more about it as we go
Mhm.
through. But just to answer your question, so the Innovation Fund 2024 had three calls. First was the net zero technologies. The second was the battery call that
Mhm.
we'll talk about in more detail. And then there was the hydrogen auction. So these were the three calls plus auction that were part of the Innovation Fund 2024. Now coming to 2025, so battery call does not exist anymore. So the three call plus auction that we have this year is the net zero technology, which
Mhm.
remains. And then battery call has been replaced by heat processes. So industrial heat processes, and they have
Mhm.
created actually a bank for it. And then, of course, the hydrogen auctions remain. So this is how IF 2025 is different. And this also is very relevant for if you are a battery pack or some a startup working along the battery value chain, that now you would be part of the net zero technologies call.
Mhm.
And within the net zero technologies, if you're focused on, there is a specific aspect around clean manufacturing. So probably you would be more suited within net zero technologies for this specific uh, project theme. Yep.
This is interesting that how this positioning, how this calls, the naming of the calls, like clearly signals priorities of European Commission. I mean, it's like hydrogen stays there at
Yep.
least for 2 years. I don't know. It has probably been the same like years before.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's still kind of priority despite all of this deflation of the hydrogen bubble, you could say. And but it's still there. It still gets funding. I don't know how much, but the fact that it doesn't matter for the purpose of our talk, because in my experience, when the government or any bureaucracy they put something separate and they label it and they keep it year after year, it means that it's high on the list of political priorities. Because when they bundle things like a net zero tech, which can be everything like sustainable fuels, heating, but okay, heat processes now separate, but now it's batteries were separate. Now they back to net zero. Probably all of the electric vehicles are there as well. I don't know.
Yep.
So
So I think there are two ways to look at it. As you clearly mentioned, that it's a policy signal. Hydrogen has been there for a while, which is a policy signal that there is a sustained support for the hydrogen economy in Europe. And then you had battery pack. Now we have industrial heat processes, and probably next year we'll have something else. So, it's also a cycle. So this year we're going to focus on batteries, the battery supply chain in Europe, and then the next year we're going to focus on industrial heat processes. So it's also that 1 year we invest in battery, and then the next year we invest in another green topic.
okay, so it's actually interesting that I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of why hydrogen, but I would stick to the batteries. It's interesting that the batteries were singled out in 2024 call, which was the year when was maybe the toughest battery year for Europe with collapse of Northvolt and with Freyr leaving and also abandoning battery ambitions. So and then they put like, no, we're going to double down and provide
Yep.
this additional money for scaling up. And now, I mean, this year been quiet on the battery front in Europe, I would say. The biggest news being the takeover of Northvolt facilities by Lighten, the US startup. Yeah, and there are also some news about commissioning on factories by ASC, and but they were not quite as celebrated, I would say, as
Hmm.
maybe they should have been. So, okay, so if this year, let's go back let's finish with the 2025 goal. So this year, if you're a battery industry player or any clean technology, clean deep tech player, and you are not in hydrogen or not in heat processing, then you apply for net zero.
Yes, and even if you are in hydrogen and you are not in hydrogen production,
Hmm.
then also, for example, you're developing new technologies for hydrogen storage and so on and so forth, then also you're looking at NZT and not the
Hmm.
hydrogen bank, because hydrogen bank is funding bankable hydrogen production projects.
Okay. I hope they will be successful in this. I mean, they would actually find bankable hydrogen production ports. Um, but if the but with the net zero, then is it different in the sense that you can apply there even if you're not building, if you're not manufacturing, if you're like still in R&D phase or piloting phase?
I think this is also one of the key sort of distinctions that we have to make, that and I started with that the innovation fund is a deployment and scale instrument. It's not an R&D grant,
Hmm.
and the focus has been on readiness. So when we talk about readiness, it is technical readiness, which means that you need to be on the TRL ladder 6 to 9. So you are already out of the lab environment.
Yep.
It also means operational readiness, which means that you need to have a clear permitting roadmap, clear construction timelines. It also means financial readiness. So you need to have readiness in terms of credible capex and opex estimates, financing structure, financial backing, clear understanding of what the grant does and not does. So the focus more and more is on projects rather than R&D products. So it's moving from it's not to support R&D. It is to support deployment. It is to support deployment at cost efficiency, at which brings GHG impact as well. So that's the overall theme of Innovation Fund. So if you're focused on R&D, then you are looking at other funding opportunities. You can be, looking at other EU instruments. Very
Okay.
interesting area to sort of look at is what EIC and EIT are doing. As part of course, the KICs. So these are sort of communities where they are sharing a lot of knowledge and innovation practices and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of instruments that you're looking at rather than the innovation fund. So innovation fund is for things that are ready and will hit let's say operation within the next 4 to 5 years.
Okay. So let's now we see the difference between the two. Let's now go into the details and let's look at our beloved battery industry, how it fared last time, and from there it will give everyone, me first of all, the clear picture.
Yeah.
How does it actually work, and what can you expect uh,
Okay.
as an applicant? Yeah. So tell us about the results of a 2024 call on the batteries.
So probably let me share the list on the screen now. So you should be able to
Okay.
see the list of
Okay. For those who will be listening to this rather than watching, we will be going through this, so you will hear what is described on the picture that Akul is showing. Yes, please
yeah.
go on.
Okay. So just to before we get into what you see on the screen, let's do a little bit of background.
Hmm.
So for the innovation fund battery call, the IF24 battery call, 14 projects were submitted.
Hmm.
13 met the eligibility criterions, and out of the 13, six projects were selected. Okay, so you see on your screen six projects, and out of the six projects, only five moved ahead to sign the grant agreement. Okay,
Okay.
and the project that did not sign the grant agreement was the CF3 at scale. So this was Cellforce Group, which is a subsidiary of Porsche, depends on
Hmm.
how you want to say it. And in August 2025, it got into troubles. And then there
Yeah.
was restructuring internally. And this is why probably they decided not to move forward with the grant agreement. Again, this is based on what is widely reported by the media. It's not exactly, official statement that has
Hmm.
come out and so on. So I think it's we need to be mindful of that when we are
Okay.
when especially the listeners are looking at the chart right now.
Okay.
So
We will provide the picture as part so people will be able to see it.
yeah, and so six projects, over 800 million euros was available as part of these six projects. And for these six projects, we were looking at 56 gigawatt hour per year by 2030. And then, of
Okay.
course, as I mentioned, Salesforce Group decided not to proceed with the signing agreement. So now we're looking at five projects, 643 million euros in total. And
Hmm.
around my estimate again is that we're looking at 54 gigawatt hour per year capacity by 2030. Okay.
This is the additional capacity that should result from this five projects, right?
Yes, so this is the aim by 2030. Yeah.
So if we pause
Mhm,
here for the second,
mhm.
so the 643 million public funding that is part that is supposed to help to bring about 54 gigawatt hour by 2030, with about 1 gigawatt hour of capacity in Europe would cost around 100 million euro, maybe a bit more like 120 if it's like NMC more, more complex manufacturing. But so I would say that it seems to me that the public funding would actually help to build like 6 gigawatt hours out of this 54.
Well, I think it's important that we do not do this, linear comparison because, of course, the million euros are backing the five projects, but it's not always backing just capacity expansion or, setting up new gigawatt factories. There is
Hmm.
also aspects around, product. There is also aspects around innovation in manufacturing and so on. So it's not only funding, from a linear perspective, just gigawatt capacity. Of course, it's doing that. It's also funding gigawatt expansion, but apart from that, it's also funding innovation manufacturing. It's funding, consolidation of specific formats of cells and so on. So it's not a straightforward sort of, comparison between 643 million gigawatts divided by 54 gigawatt hour per year
Hmm.
to get the number. So we just need to be mindful of that.
But I'm looking at what you have here. So we have, let me like walk through this a little bit, our listeners, and then you could please correct me. So we have like five winners, which are ACC,
Yeah,
the expansion across the two French gigafactories, then
yeah,
Vercor. So we have
yeah,
French leading the charge here.
yeah,
Verco expanding, doubling the capacity by 8 gigawatt hours from 8 to 16 in Dunkirk. And so two French companies. Then we
yeah.
have the Koreans in Poland, LG Energy,
Solutions. Yeah,
yeah, for 11 and a half gigawatt hour factory. Actually, all of these three, no, okay, let me just continue. Leclanche, it's a small, those of the batteries would know this, but it's a small company in Switzerland,
yeah.
as far as I remember, but they have a plant in Germany as well. right?
Yep.
And then they
Yep.
put in this small 2 gigawatt hour plant.
Yep.
And Nova Energy, um, Nova, yeah, and Nova Energy is a large scale NMC cell production but it's not, doesn't say how much. But all of this are high nickel batteries,
Yep.
NMC or NCMA, and most of them, I believe, are cylindrical cells. So it also, for me, it's like a clear statement that, okay, you have to be either very big, like ACC, Verco, LG,
Yep.
and you have to go with the NMC technology. Although the Leclerc case, it says that it's water-based electrodes, which I think a Leclerc looks to me like the only sort of innovation plus some scale, whether everybody else is just okay, we're going big on NMC.
Yes, I think you're bang on with your reading. And maybe what we can do is we can just spend a few more minutes, just try and add what you have already done. So starting with, as you said, out of the six projects, two are based in France. And this is Accept, so Automotive Cells Company European Production Takeoff. ACC, we all know it's the joint venture between Stellantis, Total Energies, and Mercedes-Benz. And this is for their plant in Douvrin. Um, and this is focused, as you clearly mentioned, this is focused on having 5 production lines for NMC cells. And
Mhm.
the total capacity we are looking at is around 15.7 gigawatt hour. So while this is good news for France, because now we see that ACC is increasingly or probably shifting entirely to France. This is bad news for Germany and Italy, because there were news that they wanted to open cell factories in Germany and Italy as well. So that's one information that I can add for the Accept
Mhm.
program, Accept project. The
Mhm.
second French project, as you mentioned, is Agat, Advanced Gigafactory, aiming at tempering greenhouse gases emissions. So this is coming from Renault's battery partner, Werke, and Werke plans to double the capacity of the Dunkirk cell factory from 8 to 16 gigawatts, as you clearly mentioned. But more importantly, they're also looking at high level of automation, the use of artificial intelligence, and on-site pre recycling facility.
So this is an example, this could be an example of what you said, that the
This
European
is,
Commission looks for this edge
yeah.
in
So it's not only funding.
greenhouse gas emissions reduction.
Yeah, so what I want to highlight with this is that it's not only funding capacity expansion, it is also funding manufacturing innovation. It's also funding automation, it's funding use of artificial intelligence, it's funding on-site pre recycling facilities, which are of course intended to cut production cost and improve sustainability. So the focus is on scale, but the focus is also on manufacturing innovation. And then when we move to the WGFTG, this is the Will Start Gigafactory, 2 gigawatts. And this is
Just
backed
the
by the,
Leclerc.
exactly. So this is Leclanche, and as you clearly mentioned, this is the only mid-size player that we see within the list of awardees. And so, of course, the project focuses on industrializing there is this battery capacity topic, but then it also focuses on industrializing Leclanche, the PFAS-free production process. So this is for your listeners. It's uh, perfluoroalkali and polyfluoroalkyl substances. So this is what you keep on hearing in the news as forever chemicals. So they are
Mhm.
working on a water-based procedure, which can be used for both NMC cells. Okay, and in NMC cells, they're especially interesting because they reduce the cobalt content, but it can also be used for LFP cells. Okay,
Mhm.
so so again, there is the capacity aspect, but then predominantly is the PFAS-free production processes that the grant is supporting. Then we move on to Sweden. So within Sweden, we have the Novo, which probably from the acronym itself, you can understand that NO was for Northvolt and VO was for Volvo. Uh, and So this is, of course, with Northvolt's insolvency, it has led to slow down. We saw job cuts and so on, but still, the commission had decided to support this project. And of course, the commission defends it by saying that it meets the expert criteria, the evaluation, and so on and so forth. So it's eligible. But it also shows us that European Union is willing to support projects that are struggling today
Okay.
if they bring the necessary maturity. Okay, so I think that's one key takeaway from, especially at the project level. And then, as you mentioned, the largest player in the house, which is LG Energy Solutions, with their project, which translates to powering the future, 46 cylinders, infinite possibilities in Europe. That's how the acronym translates.
Mhm.
Is focused on 46 millimeter cylindrical cells in Poland, and these are the high volume cylindrical cells which are increasingly being used in electric vehicles. And one example, of course, as you see on the screen right now, is BMW's new class. So this will be the first EV platform with the 46 cells. And I think it's
Okay.
very important to say that this is where also the European Commission is trying to lock technology policy with technology. So now we are focused on a specific format of cells. Okay,
Mhm.
as I mentioned, apart from uh, capacity expansion for each of these projects, there is another dimension that they're bringing to the table. Okay, and
Okay.
now getting back to the sort of key trends that you started to highlight. First and foremost, of course, there is a strong chemistry continuity. As you mentioned that we see NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt, and we see NCMA. Uh, so what we can see with this chemistry continuity is that the EU is not betting on disruptive chemistry shifts at this stage. And this goes back to what I started to say at the
Mhm.
beginning of this call. This battery call was more focused on scale, and the innovation that the European Commission has awarded. If we look at a cross-cutting trend of across the list of awardees, is manufacturing efficiency. Of course, there is the whole aspect around sustainability, but also for match choice. So this is something that we need to keep in mind, that there is a strong focus on continuing with existing proven chemistries versus spending more euros into finding the next disruptive chemistry for battery cells. The second, and this is what we see with the LG Energy Solutions project in Poland, is the format, as I mentioned earlier, is becoming industrial policy. So we see explicit support for a specific format, 46 millimeter cylindrical cells. This format today is largely produced outside Europe,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's closely aligned with next generation OEM platform. So supporting this format is a way for Europe to lock Europe into future vehicle architectures, as we see with the case of BMW. Then the other aspect, the key trend that we see across these different projects, is manufacturing decarbonization. So this is also treated as a competitive lever. We talked about automation, we talked about AI-driven processes, we talked about solvent-free or PFAS-free electrodes, we talked about embedding recycling, not as add-ons, but core to your offering. So this becomes a core value to the funded project. And then the other topic that we talked about is, of course, scale and bankability. Projects like projects with the likes of ACC, Worker, LG Energy Solution anchor the portfolio with near-term financeable capacity. Uh, and the only project which is, let's say, a smaller project is funded because it's unlocking a process level transformation. And finally, and I think most importantly, is that demand anchoring is decisive. So across almost all the signed projects, we see that it has backing of a leading European OEM. So there is
Mhm.
limited offtake risk, and then at the same time, there is accelerated time to market for all of the selected And of course, projects that have signed the uh, grant. So yeah, so these are the trends that we need to keep in mind. So all in all, if I can, sort of pinpoint and sum up this slide into one word, it's scale.
Okay.
So there is scale, but then scale is not traditional capacity expansion. Scale can also come from manufacturing innovation. Scale can come from, using a specific format or focusing on a specific format. So with the focus here in my reading is scale, but then as I mentioned, the definition of scale changes when we talk about capacity, when we talk about production, when we talk about a specific cell chemistry or format.
Okay. So I think it's quite important. I'm not putting any positive or negative on this, but it's important to know if you're looking for these funds, the things that you mentioned, things like, okay, scale, yes, you need, but you just scale is not enough. I mean, you need to have this uh, GHG impact. You need to have this some new additional show that you have some manufacturing know-how, either in artificial intelligence use or some new technology like water-based electrodes or something else. And the important thing you mentioned, these demand anchoring, which
Yeah.
is basically offtakes from big OEMs. And this just basically brings me to one of the frameworks of first of building first of a kind, which I'm working on, where you go for where financing is the last step you take. Because normally when people talk about folk first of a kind, they start with money just because it's so easy to see this gap in financing. And they focus on the money, but for me, the lack of money at folk, this financing gap, is a symptom, not a cause. Is a symptom of the many risks you have in this folk stage and what we just went through with these results of Innovation Fund 2024 is clearly demonstrates. I mean, these companies de-risked as much as they can, as they could, like technology, demand, planning, everything, and then they went for the money as the last step.
Yep, I think we talked about this in the last video as well. All these players that we see on the screen are proven players. They have been there for a while, not only from a technology perspective, but they have a lot of maturity when it comes to manufacturing. And this is becoming, especially when we talk about battery, thanks to the experiences that we have had
Mhm.
in the past 2 years, especially in Europe. This is where the focus is on manufacturing, and I think it's important to keep in mind that innovation fund is not a tool or a signal to make your project bankable. It's actually the other way around. You have a bankable project, innovation fund is going to move that bankable project to deployment. So that's the philosophy that
That's
that
important. Yeah,
yeah,
I fully
everyone
agree
who's
with you.
applying through the innovation fund should keep in mind. So the bankability is not a signal that you will bring with the innovation fund. It's actually the other way around. You bring that signal to innovation fund, and because you have that bankability, innovation fund will be interested in investing in you. So again, of course, there are a lot of other parameters that innovation fund looks at, but this is one key takeaway that I would like to share with your viewers.
But this brings me to quite a provocative, I would say, question to you. Maybe
Hmm.
not to Oracle, but to European Commission and Investment Fund. I did make this crude comparison. Okay, out of 54 gigawatt hours, this 643 million could actually fund, six. So any single project got around roughly like 100 million. Maybe some got more, some got less. On average, you got 100 million. And the average project size here is billions. So say I have a 5 billion or 6 billion. What they take Verkor, for example, they have to build 8 gigawatt hours, plus they have to build recycling, plus they have all other things. So I would say uh, the total capex is bigger than 8 billion euros, probably more. And what they get. So they spend this year and a half, applying for these funds, doing all this exercise. And then they get in the end a couple of 100 million, 200 million euro maybe.
Yep.
Is it worth
So
it? I
so
mean, the question is why spend a year and a half going through the bureaucratic hell only to get something, some money for your already bankable project, by the way, which will finance a teeny weeny bit and for which you have to report. And we talked about this in the previous episode, the amount of reporting you have to do after that. In your
yeah.
experience, I mean, Akul,
Hmm.
is it worth it? I mean, I would have been, if I would be a decision maker at work, I would say, to hell with it. We can find this 200 million, I mean, from somewhere.
Hmm.
I mean, uh, a good deal with a supplier can get you economies like that.
Yeah.
So what's your take on this? Is it worth it?
So I think again, I'm not getting into the number, how many million funds, how many
Sure, yeah. I mean, I
gigawatts,
mean,
and
I'm
so
I'm talking
because
general because
yeah,
just from this, I just see, and I think if the only place where the only where project where it would make sense is with Le Clanche. Everybody else
I'm
would be just better off without it.
yeah, yeah, no, I understand, and I understand what you're getting at as well. All of these are big players. As you said, it funds, let's say, a very small percentage, maybe in late single digits or early double digits of the overall financing requirement. Uh, there are a couple of aspects we need to keep in mind. First, all of these are uh, players who are mature, who know exactly where the technology stands versus the global benchmark, state of the art, and so on and so forth. So they already have a lot of this material ready. Whatever is required for the grant proposal, they have almost all of it ready. They know what kind of GHG emission reduction they're talking about. They know
Yeah,
uh,
I'm sure. So I'm sure they
they
know
they
they have big teams. I
they
mean, they
they're reusing. So that's what we talked about even in the last call. So there is a lot of focus, especially for these large players, both of course for the battery call, but also for the hydrogen bank, is to develop all the material that you have to be reusable in different funding requirements and so on. Okay, so that's one aspect. So there is a lot of reusing of material that's already there. They're very mature. They have these GIG calculations, so on, and they have it, of course, for their application for innovation fund. But then on top of the innovation fund, they are also eligible for other funding opportunities, and that's what we talked about. A lot of these innovation funding projects are utilizing blending finance. For example, the hydrogen auction is hydrogen auction plus IPCEI, or hydrogen auction plus the CEF, the Connecting Europe facility, is what we are seeing as a sort of a standard template when it's come to project financing. So probably a lot of these projects are also looking at the same sort of blended finance, where innovation fund is not the only funding, grant, or subsidy that they're getting from the European Union. Okay, and on top of that, they are also getting support at the member state level. So if you are a gigafactory in France, you have specific national provisions that provides you funds and subsidies for you to set up your production facility in France on top of what you already have from the European Commission. So having European Commission funding signals that you've gone through this uh, rigorous evaluation. So it becomes important for other funding opportunities. So that's there. So I think whenever we evaluate just the numbers with what it is able, how gigawatt, maybe it gives us not the full picture. Of course, that's part and parcel of it, but it brings, in terms of, maybe the grant is specifically focused on a specific aspect. For example, like Launcher is focused on a specific uh, type of the PFAS free topic. Then we talked about Worker is focused on having a pre-recyclability facility. So maybe the grant is just funding that aspect of the overall project. So we need to keep in mind all of this, and then the signaling aspect, not only for innovation funding, maybe even for private funding, maybe even for their internal stakeholders, that, hey
Okay.
guys, we have gone through this external evaluation, which has evaluated our technology, which has evaluated our financial maturity, our cost maturity, which is very important, especially when we talk about scaling uh, for for battery, for cells and so on, which becomes very important. And that also is a strong signal, not only for external stakeholders but also for internal stakeholders. So this is why these big companies are spending the time that they are spending to have access to the innovation fund.
Okay. I think we can take down the picture now. From yeah, thanks a lot. So, okay, this is so basically, if you are successful in your innovation fund application, it's opens the doors to other public finance sources. Is that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, so it does that, and on top of that, what it does is now you have created this package which has been already evaluated by external independent reviewers. So now this package can support your other applications, both of course at the EU level, but it can also support your applications to have access to funding and grants and subsidies that are available at the national level. So it serves a lot of purposes, both for external actions and for internal actions.
But the thing that still kind of bugs me here is, I mean, I make project documentation, I do all my budgeting, I do all the calculations before I submit this because that's what I need to submit with all this
Yeah,
figures.
yeah,
A year and a half later, when the decision comes through, all of that has changed. And in the current environment, in the world that we live now, I mean, you can have the price of your main inputs change overnight because again there is some United States decided that okay, now we want Venezuela is not enough, let's go grab something else, and or China made some move or whatever happened, and then you get a call from your supplier say, oh, you know what, we're delivering it like 3 months late, or European Union introduced new tariffs, so, or United States introduced new tariffs, so the price is now this. So by the time you actually get the money, everything has to be redone. I mean, and your budget changed, everything changed, even your supplies could have been changed. So it's not only the amount that you get or the opportunities that you get, but also in the world today, the time to to actually start working because this is one of the most important things I've seen in projects. When you actually start digging, you have to dig fast. And before that, okay, you can take a lot of time planning and thinking, but the moment you start digging, you have to dig very, very fast because things change daily, and you can be out of the budget very sooner than you imagine, and then
yep,
your project stalls. So this is one of the things which always bothered me with the public finance, regardless of whether Europe or Russia, where I worked, or United States, doesn't matter. The process is so long, and often it's like really not worth it. I mean, the times I was involved in big industrial folk projects, the only time we got public finance was from a region where we were going to build a factory, and we started negotiations in June. We signed the
yep.
contract in September. The budget was passed in October, so we could get money starting like April next year.
Okay.
That was extremely fast for any kind of public funds. It was extremely fast. But this project was really important for the region. They wanted it, so they were ready to kind of push it through the legislature, and also all of the regional parliament was also very much in favor of it. So it was easy in that sense. But it was the only time I actually went in the like projects with the that project was over $200 million. Previous was over $1 billion. And then the $1 billion project we said no public funds because we have deadlines. and
Yep.
public funds, we wouldn't be able to do deadlines. So, what's in your experience? I mean, were there any cases where the company you work for would look at this, they say, nah, screw it.
But, of course, as we said, it's not free money. It's not free euros. There's a lot of effort, time, and resources that go first into the grant proposal writing, and then, of course, also to meet the reporting cadence. At the same time, European Commission has made concerted efforts to make sure that the bureaucratic or administrative reporting weight has been reduced, especially when it comes to SMEs and startups who do not have these level of administrative and reporting resources. But just to break down what you have said, first and foremost, let's talk about what you can do at the grant level. So, and this is actually one of the criteria at which the European or the independent reviewers look at your application is the level of maturity that your project has. Okay, so if you are financially mature, you have looked at all of these scenarios. Of course, if it's a black swan event and someone decides to do, there's a significant geopolitical event which no one saw it coming. That's a black swan event, so you can't really model it into your financial matrix and so on. But if it's not a black swan event, if it's a natural increase in sell prices, sell sorry, natural increase in mineral prices and so on, which ties back to, of course, the specific cell chemistry that you're working on, then that should already be baked in to your financial
Mhm.
modeling. That is a key criteria. You're only financially mature when you have looked at all of these aspects. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what you can do at the in terms of your grant. Um, Application and what has worked for a lot of these kind of projects, especially where innovation is happening at a significant pace, or there are critical dependencies. For example, in when we talk about battery, we always talk about dependencies for lithium and so on. What winning projects have done is that they have got letters of support from their suppliers, or um, as part of their grant application. So they know with their supplier that XYZ event happens, we still be able to meet what we have built together, what we have built in some cases together actually as the financial matrix. Okay. And at the same time, you do it for the people on the other end of the supply chain, which is your off taker. So I talk to my off taker, commercial off take, and in this battery case, it will be OEMs. There is a letter of support as well that you can put as part of your grant proposal, which says that there is this clear indication for offtake going ahead for these many years for this volume, and that is based on a certain price threshold, and that price threshold is based on certain aspects, which of course can move. So all of that maturity first needs to be baked in to your grant proposal.
Mhm.
Okay, because of things will change, and it's very normal, especially for batteries and cells to see these kind of changes uh, because of their mineral reliance and so on. And on the other side, when you're awarded, and then before to move from awarded to proceeding for grant agreement signature, uh, there is also this discussion that you can have. Probably you submitted numbers which are not valid anymore, and you need to defend that in front of the independent reviewers that okay, whatever we submitted is not value, is first it should be not the case that it's not valid anymore because it should already be baked in. But if there is a black swan event, of course there is room to wiggle. Okay, and this is why as we saw in the case of battery call, there were 6 projects and only 5 of them signed up. One of them did not sign up because of internal restructuring and so on and so forth, because they ended up into this specific event. So that's there. And also we need to keep in mind, apart from Leclanche project, all of the other projects already have OEMs as partners, as as part, it's or probably it's a JV with leading OEMs. So you have that offtake predictability regardless of how the prices might swing. Okay,
Mhm.
because they are part and parcel of the project. And this is why we see that and I think this is a key sort of takeaway we can take from this project's battery call, is that offtake certainty is becoming very, very important. We see it for, of course, battery call. We see it also for, more and more for hydrogen projects as well. So by design, having these OEMs on board already, what European Commission has done is that it has taken care of the situation where the price might fluctuate aggressively. So,
Okay.
there are these caveats in mind. But again, coming back to your point on the time and effort, of course, there is time and effort spent. But then, the returns in terms of course, internal and external returns is quite significant. And this is why, these ACC, which has folks from Stellantis, which have folks from Mercedes-Benz, folks from Total, is willing to invest that amount of time to have access to the innovation fund.
Yeah, things like a big boys business, but then any kind of scale up, you're not small anymore. You have to you're
Especially,
going big.
yeah, especially when we talk about battery, and that has been the experience in Europe. Of course, we have been looking at technology breakthrough, but now it's more about manufacturing. It's more about scaling, and we see if you like to call them big boys, of course, but we see players who are much more mature when it comes to industrialization of technologies and products. So that's also a clear trend that we can see, that companies who have spent a lot of time in the automotive supply chain, who understand the difficulties that you can have in automotive supply chain, can be change in prices, can be delays, and so on, are the ones who are being now trusted to be the leaders as far as battery and cells are concerned in Europe.
Okay. This actually, how what you explained to me today and in the previous episode kind of makes me wonder why have a European scale up fund? Because what you say about innovation fund is like, okay, looks like it kind of does the job. So I'm kind of foreshadowing the next episodes where we're going to talk about European Scale Up Fund, and we're going to talk not only about that but also about how it's going to work. What are the expectations? What is the background for that fund? Why it exists? What should it cover? We'll also talk about implementation of first of a kind projects in Europe in clean tech and what challenges they meet. I mean, what happens after you get funding, basically. So, which is, I think, there's a lot of emphasis on how to get the money, but not enough emphasis on what do you do with that money after you get them. So, yeah, this is what I would like to talk to you about in our next episode. And just to finalize this one, I really enjoyed the discussion on this battery, having battery companies as an illustration of how innovation funds work. But it's really close to what I'm doing and what you are doing and what a lot of the people who listen and watch my podcasts, I know many of them are involved in battery industry, and my episodes with battery people score higher than any others. Yeah, so that's really good illustration that for if you want to go for European Innovation Fund, then you already have to have quite established team, suppliers, off-takers. Not necessarily, but then you have to like Launch, for example, didn't have enough taker, and they still got the money, but you have to have this long-term vision and the ability to sustain this application procedure, evaluation procedure, and then reporting how to get the money. And then also innovation fund. It's not the end stop. It's the point which opens you the doors to other public finance instruments, which you can then obtain, I hope, faster
Yep.
or easier. So yeah, is there anything else you would like to add as a closing remarks to this episode, Akul?
Yep. I think it's important that, we leave the startups with motivation to apply to these European instruments. And Innovation Fund is, of course, one of them, but there are a lot of others that are available. I think even if you do not get selected as part of the Innovation Fund list of awardees, what you also get is a step, sort of a certification that you are a quality project, which might not meet the specific requirements of the Innovation Fund, but at least you get that sort of accreditation certification, which can work as a signal both for, of course, to get access to other EU funding opportunities, but also if you're looking for private funding. So, that's one seal of approval that you can get, uh, even if you do not get selected for the Innovation Fund. The other aspect is that what Innovation Fund also does is that even if you're not selected and they see that what you're providing, what you submitted is credible, there is significant impact it can deliver in the future, they also provide you uh, sort of project assistance. It can be provided through the different sort of organization institutions that are part of the larger, European agency. So that assistance can also be provided even if you don't get selected, which is highly valuable. So I think it's important that we keep that in mind. There are some consolation prizes, if I can say so. And probably the last sort of piece of advice that I would like to leave, especially your viewers who are part of startups or founders who are embarking on their journey or already are on their journey. If you're looking at European funding, you need to start behaving like an industrial asset. You cannot behave like a research program because the mood
Mm.
for the larger European ambition is moving from the ambition and breakthrough technologies to scaling, manufacturing, and deployment. So it's important that you start thinking of yourself as an industrial asset. And then when you do that, everything else in terms of financial maturity, operational maturity, permitting, so on and so forth, starts falling in place. So that sort of switch in philosophy of how you look at yourself is also very important.
Okay, that's great. That's great advice. Thank you very much, Cool. Thank you for this episode. And I'm looking forward to talk to in our third and final episode on EU financing.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
To you.